Okay, let's dive in. There's some pretty surprising news hitting the logistics world. DHL, they're actually suspending shipments over $800 into the U.S.
That's right. Starting tomorrow, April 21st. And it's not just, from one or two places.
No, that's the kicker, isn't it? It's from everywhere. A global suspension for that value bracket going into the States.
Yeah, and when a giant like DHL makes a move that big, I mean, it really makes you stop and think. It signals something pretty substantial is going on underneath.
Absolutely. So what's the trigger? It seems to boil down to new U.S. government rules.
New regulations requiring full, formal customs entry for anything over that $800 mark.
Right. And that sounds complex, like way more than just ticking a box.
Oh, definitely. Think more paperwork, much more detailed declarations, potentially inspections. It adds significant friction to the process.
Friction, yeah, that's a good word. More time, more hassle, and you have to assume more cost, right?
Exactly. Compared to whatever more streamlined process they likely had before for these kinds of shipments, it's a fundamental change in how these goods cross the border.
It feels almost like, imagine if Uber suddenly said, sorry, only carpools from now on, new traffic laws. It's that kind of operational shift forced by regulation.
That's a decent analogy, actually. And what's really interesting is the why behind the why. These customs rules didn't just appear out of nowhere.
No, they seem directly linked to recent U.S. tariff policies, don't they?
Precisely. It's widely seen as a direct consequence, a tool being used to tighten the reins on imports, particularly in that higher value category.
So the goal, is it maybe about slowing down that, high-speed, often lower-tax import flow we've seen grow so much, especially with e-commerce?
It certainly seems to be a major part of the strategy based on our sources. Targeting that cross-border e-commerce model, particularly from places like China, seems like a key objective.
By making it harder, or at least more administratively burdensome, for these higher-value goods to just fly through customs under the old system.
Right. He kind of forces goods into a more, let's say, traditional and regulated import pathway. It's an interesting use of customs law, not just direct tariffs.
Yeah, it's like using the rule book itself as the barrier rather than just the price tag of a tariff. More subtle, maybe.
Potentially. Though the impact, as we're seeing with DHL, can be just as dramatic. It's a sort of economic pressure applied through bureaucratic means.
Okay, so let's break down the impact. For listeners, people buying stuff online, what does this likely mean?
Well, the most immediate thing is probably price increases, especially for, luxury goods, electronics, maybe high-end fashion coming from abroad.
Those items typically over the $800 threshold. The days of getting those delivered relatively easily, maybe without extra duty fees baked in, those might be numbered.
It certainly looks that way. The cost of getting those goods into the country is going up for the shipper, and that often gets passed on.
Okay. And what about the businesses, the online retailers, the brands using DHL for this kind of shipping?
It's a pretty big shakeup for them. They're facing increased logistics costs, definitely, but also potential delays.
Right. If things get bogged down in customs, that affects customer satisfaction, inventory planning, the whole chain.
Absolutely. They'll need to rethink their shipping strategies, their pricing, maybe even where they warehouse goods. It's a significant operational headache.
Some of the analysis we looked at used pretty strong language, framing it almost as economic warfare through customs law.
Yeah, that phrase captures the idea that this isn't just a minor tweak. It's intended to fundamentally alter trade flows, to put pressure on certain export models.
And DHL's reaction, pulling back entirely on that segment, it really underscores how impactful these policy changes are on the ground, on the actual nuts and bolts of moving stuff.
It does. There was that one quote, pretty blunt.
Yeah.
When your supply chain rage quits, you know policy's doing something real.
Rage quits. That's evocative. But it kind of fits, doesn't it? It's such a drastic response from a major player.
It really does capture the severity of the disruption, I think.
So, pulling back a bit, this feels like more than just a DHL story, or even just an $800 customs rule story. It makes you wonder, right?
About the bigger picture.
Yeah. If this is the direction things are heading, using customs complexity as a tool, what does that mean long-term for global trade, for how easily we get products from around the world?
It certainly poses some big questions. Could we see a pullback from globalization in certain sectors? Will consumer habits shift if international goods become significantly more expensive or harder to get?
Definitely something we'll need to keep watching. It feels like one of those small changes that could signal a much larger shift underway. Food for thought.